Today's video is different from any other video I have ever made. Stay tuned for a cautionary tale of what occurs when someone places a hex or a curse on a person. Yes, hexes and curses are very real, and they did not go out of vogue in the 16th century. And the real danger behind a hex and a curse is when you are completely unaware and you just chalk it up to bad things just keep happening to me. I wonder why. Why am I having all this bad luck? The problems become more frequent and bigger as time goes on. This is exactly what happened to Rachel. Today's video is very different in that it is a story I have decided to share on my YouTube channel. I originally was going to do this just in my newsletter, but I realized more people could be helped by what happened to this poor unfortunate woman than those who are just subscribed to my newsletter. And by the way, if you'd like to subscribe, the link is down below in the description. This is about a woman who used to work with my husband. Let's call her Rachel. Not her real name. Rachel and my husband had been working together for over a year, and she was a really great coworker. She was excellent at her job. She required very little training because she had all this experience behind her. Everything was going great for about the first 8 months or so. And then Rachel's father, unfortunately, passed away. He and Rachel had been extremely close. Now, Rachel's father happened to have been moderately wealthy. I mean, this man had 3 luxury vehicles in his garage, and we're talking like top model was a Bentley, base model was a Jag. Okay, so you get the idea. And I forget what the middle one was, but anyway, he had 3 luxury cars in his garage that he used on a regular basis. And he lived in a really nice big house, and he had a wife. His wife was Rachel's stepmother. Now, Rachel would stay with her father for extended periods of time and got along well with her stepmother. They didn't have any issues. Well, Rachel's father had a favorite song. And if you're familiar at all with the song, Cheaper to Keep Her, it's literally about being cheaper to keep her. And Rachel's father would actually sing that song to his wife in front of Rachel and considered it a joke. The wife was none too happy about this. Obviously, who would be, right? So time goes on. Then her father passes away unexpectedly. And of course, Rachel's devastated. And she was telling my husband, what am I going to do without my daddy? I cannot imagine life without my daddy. And yes, this is a grown woman who still called her father daddy. The term daddy, it's a special term of endearment, that she never gave up from her, little kitty years. Like most of us, as we grow, we start shortening the daddy into dad, and maybe even as an adult, we might refer to him as father. Who knows? It depends on how formalized the relationship is. With her dad was always daddy. Then all the crap hit the fan when they went to the reading of his will. Now remember, this is a man who sung the song, Cheaper to Keep Her, to his wife, right? It turns out he cut his wife completely out of his will. She got nothing. Just gifts and clothing she'd been given over the years. Absolutely nothing. This came as a huge shock to everyone there, including Rachel. And the stepmother flew off the handle. As can happen at the reading of a will, when someone finds out at that moment in time, they've been completely cut out. And she was off the deep end pretty much immediately when this occurred, because you've got to imagine it was a tremendous shock. I mean, they've been married for quite a number of years. So, of course, as his spouse, she expected something, at the very least, the house. That didn't happen. Rachel's father left his entire estate to Rachel. That immediately created a feeling of hatred and animosity from Rachel's stepmother toward Rachel. And Rachel, she didn't know what to say. Everybody was in shock, everyone. And so they parted ways, and the stepmother was screaming and yelling and, almost had to be carted off by her branch of the family. And Rachel went home, and she came into work the next day after the reading of the will and told my husband everything that had happened, and he was shocked too. And Rachel says, as soon as I get everything cleared up with my lawyer, I'm just giving her the house. She deserves to have that house. That was their home together. Rachel already had her own house, and she liked her house, so she was going to stay put. She didn't have any interest in moving into her father's old home, and she had figured she would, that the stepmother would inherit it, but that wasn't the case. So this was her plan, to give her stepmother the home and to also give her 2 out of the 3 luxury vehicles that were still in the garage. So Rachel was going to do all this. She's telling my husband this at work, right? This is the day after the will was read. Rachel then goes home, and she finds garbage strewn all over her front yard. From side to side, back to front. Everywhere this person had access to, they dumped trash. She didn't know what had happened, right? So she called the cops. The police come out, and of course, the first thing they do is they ask the neighbors if they could look at the footage on their Ring cameras, because these days, most people have a Ring camera. It's just the prudent thing to do, So they start looking at the Ring camera footage, and at a Ring camera across the street, they see her father's Jag come rolling down the street, pull over, and this woman pulls out 2 smaller trash cans. It was an SUV Jag. That's what it was, because that's the only way the trash cans would have fit into a Jag. It was an SUV Jag. She pulled out 2 trash cans from the back, hauled them up to Rachel's property, and just started throwing crap everywhere until her front yard was just covered. I mean, who does things like this? It sounds like a TV show. Well, I think that's bad. Just wait. Just wait. It gets so much worse for poor Rachel, and then the element of the supernatural comes into this. So, they know who did it. They go talk to the stepmother, who of course denies everything. And they're like, we have you on video. So what does this... Again, I tell these stories and somebody's messing with me. Someone's tickling my forehead now. I swear. Anyway, excuse me. So, to get back to the story. Her stepmom, of course, denies everything. She's fined, whatever, a really minor infraction of the law. No big thing is going to come of this. So Rachel is reeling from the shocking loss of her father, the shock of the will, having to wait on the lawyer to get everything squared away with the home and the cars, so she could still give her stepmother the house and 2 of the cars. That was her full intention. And after the cops visited the stepmother, she called her grown son and daughter to come over. She cleared out all her stuff from the house. Again, this is caught on neighbors' Ring cameras. And then the son and the daughter drive away in their vehicles. Stepmom goes back in, for a few minutes, real short, comes back out, gets in her vehicle, drives away. A little while later, a neighbor reports seeing smoke coming out of one of the upstairs windows of the home that the stepmother had shared with Rachel's father. And by the time the fire department arrived, that house was a lost cause. It had to be scraped to its foundation. Of course, the police called Rachel. She goes to the home. She's sitting on the curb crying. They call the stepmother, who comes and is acting like she's not surprised. Everyone else, the neighbors, Rachel, the police, everyone's freaking out and asking, what do you think happened? What is going on here? And then in the hearing of a detective, the stepmother yells at Rachel and says, I won't stop until you're dead. And Rachel's like, what in the hell did I ever do to you? I did nothing to you. I was going to leave you the house. You burned it down. I was going to leave you the freaking house. And the stepmother was like, yeah, like hell you were, and she got in her vehicle and, and the cops went and said, no, where do you think you're going? So they said, you can't leave town. All right. So she couldn't leave town. So she goes home, right? And then the investigation begins as to the cause of the fire. And they found out that an accelerant had been used in the master bedroom. And the fire had begun on the king-size bed in the master bedroom, the bed she had shared with her now deceased husband. And again, with everything being caught on a ring camera, with this woman's prized possessions, her furs, her jewelry and whatnot, artwork, being carted out of the house, and then her going in not 5 minutes before a neighbor reports smoke coming from out of a window. Doesn't take a genius, right? So the woman gets arrested for suspected arson, which is a felony. And she's found guilty. Meanwhile, Rachel's lost her father. She's lost a major asset that was left to her. And she's all alone in this. She has her own kids to raise. She is a single mom. Everything was on her shoulders. So, of course, her work with my husband just kind of fell through the floor. She couldn't handle it. She started calling in sick all the time because she had a lot of crap to deal with, to say the least. Not just the financial mess, but all of the emotional turmoil that poor woman was being forced to endure. Well, the stepmother ends up being sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison for the arson. So now everyone figures Rachel's problems are now over. She has settled all the other aspects of her father's estate. Again, everything's in her name. And after all the garbage, literally, that her stepmother had pulled, of course she wasn't going to give her any of it. And the woman's now in jail. It's not going to do her any good anyway. So a little bit of time goes by. Remember what Rachel's stepmother told her in the hearing of a detective. I will not stop until you're dead. There's a great deal of hate behind that phrase. And as my husband told me what Rachel had told him at work, as a sensitive, I could feel that. And my first thought was, as a spiritual practitioner who is aware of the possibility of energy being manipulated for dark endeavors, my first thought was, that woman's going to hire someone to put a curse on Rachel. That was my first thought. And I told my husband that. Now, my husband, you have to understand, he's a Virgo. If you know a Virgo, you know they're very practical. They're down to earth. Salt of the earth people. Virgos are wonderful. My husband's a Virgo. My daughter's a Virgo. I, on the other hand, am a quadruple Gemini. I've got 4 planets in Gemini. So I'm just kind of all over the place, right? It's my natural state of being every day, all over the place. So we butt heads once in a while, but it's nothing major. And he looked at me when I said, she's going to hire someone to put a curse on Rachel. You've got to warn Rachel. He just kind of laughed. He says, that doesn't happen. I'm like, what do you mean that doesn't happen? I said, it sure as heck does. I said, I've got a number of clients I have helped to get curses and hexes off of them. I said, this stuff is very real, unfortunately. And the real danger behind a hex and a curse is when you are completely unaware and you just chalk it up to bad things just keep happening to me. I wonder why. Why am I having all this bad luck? You wonder and you wonder and you wonder as the problems become more frequent and bigger as time goes on. This is exactly what happened to Rachel. This poor woman is a textbook case of what happens when an enemy levels a death curse on a person. And that's exactly what this was. It was a death curse. What happens is Rachel starts getting sick. Just no good reason. She starts having problems with her cycle. Now she's older. She's got one kid who's basically grown. He's like 19 or so. And her daughter is a teenager, younger teenager. And so, her doctor says, oh, it's just, you're going into menopause now. And this is part of the course for many women, which is true. It is, for many of us. And so that's what they think, and they write it off. Well, then she just starts getting sicker and sicker. So she goes in for testing. They find out she's got ovarian cancer. Her family has no history of cancer. And ovarian and uterine cancers are two types of cancer that can be highly hereditary. If you have a history of that in your family, please, and you're a female, get yourself checked out, please. But Rachel had no family history of it. And she was like, this is crazy. But, she believes her doctor, of course, who sends her to an oncologist, and she begins treatment for the ovarian cancer, which is very aggressive. And so they have to go in and do surgery and remove her ovaries and her fallopian tubes. And then they say, we're going to put you through a round of chemo, and that should be that, because it hadn't spread. Thank God, right? So she goes through her round of chemo, seems to be just fine. And then the lower abdominal pain begins. It's severe. It keeps her up all night. This goes on for a couple of weeks. Here she was writing it off as some sort of a stomach virus, which, is only natural. That's what you would assume. It wasn't a stomach virus. It turned out to be uterine cancer. The cancer had now spread into her uterus. She had to go back into the hospital and have that organ removed. So then she had to go through a round of radiation. I may have the chemo and the radiation switched. I'm not sure, but just keep that in mind. But she did have one round of chemo, one round of radiation for the ovarian and then the uterine cancer. And then she eventually finishes that round for the uterine cancer and is given the all clear. Meanwhile, other parts of her life are just falling apart. It's one thing after another, after another, after another. Her son and her end up having a big fight. He storms out of the house. Now remember, he's like 18, 19 years old. He basically just leaves the house with the clothes on his back, insisting he's never going to return. And then later that day, family members began calling Rachel saying, hey, your son called me asking for money. He says you kicked him out. And Rachel says, I did nothing of the sort. He left on his own. And he's bothering you now for money? Don't be giving him any money. He just needs to come back home. So, of course, that's what happened. No one gave him any money. So what's this guy do? He goes into a convenience store, tries to steal some food, and gets caught, arrested, found guilty, gets thrown into jail. While in jail, his lawyer's working hard to get him out and is in the process of getting Rachel's son released when the son gets badly beaten in jail to the point he's sent to the hospital. While in the hospital, he gets released. His lawyer gets him out. So he then goes back home. His mother nurses him back to health, and he's fine, right? And then they turn around and they sue the jail. And he gets a really nice lump sum. And then he goes off and he spends it all on a souped up truck, a souped up TV and gaming system, and a rickety old run-down trailer. And he goes and he moves into the trailer. And then what happens? Someone steals his TV and his gaming system, of course. So Rachel's got to be dealing with all of this, right? Then her son's out driving around somewhere. And a truck driver who'd fallen asleep at the wheel of a semi hits him. Thankfully, Rachel's son survived that, but he had a badly broken leg that had to have steel rods placed into it to replace a couple of bones. So she's dealing with all that happens to her son, right? Now, let's switch focus to her daughter, who I said was a younger teenager. Pretty young. She was like 13, 14 years old. Now, Rachel, even though her father had left her this really nice estate, is still working. And she's still working with my husband. They're both employed by the same company, you know. And all the stuff's going on, and that's how come I know about it, because she's going to work telling my husband about it. Well, unbeknownst to Rachel, while she's at work, after her daughter gets home from school, she's having guys coming to the house. And you know what young teenagers can get up to when left unsupervised. And that's exactly what happened here. So Rachel's daughter ended up getting pregnant. Her son's leg wasn't even completely healed yet. He was still basically in bed from it. And now she had to deal with a pregnant 14-year-old daughter. And so she has to take her, we're in Texas, she had to take her out of state to get the situation cleared up. All this is happening. Meanwhile, Rachel's health begins to deteriorate again. She goes back to her doctor, who runs an additional battery of tests, turns around and sends her right back to the oncologist. Rachel finds out the cancer's back and it has spread to her stomach and it's inoperable. So she unfortunately ended up with a terminal diagnosis. While all this had been unfolding, I kept telling my husband with every new story he was telling me about Rachel, I was saying, you've got to warn her. You have to tell her her stepmother has hired someone in prison to do a death curse on Rachel for revenge. And you know, at the time of the uterine cancer, my husband fully believed me. And he started telling Rachel, My wife is convinced you've been cursed. Now, Rachel, like many people, she's very strong in her faith. She's strong in her Christian faith, her walk with Christ, just as I am. I'm a Christian myself. I was raised Catholic. I am a lapsed Catholic, but I am a Christian all the same. And she believed going to someone like me for help with what was clearly a spiritual problem was against her religious principles. Now, that is a choice she made, and she is fully capable and fully within her rights to make such a choice. Unfortunately for Rachel, this did not go well. And she is no longer with us. Meanwhile, the stepmother is still in prison serving out her time. And she was 63, I believe, when she went into prison with a 20-year prison sentence. So chances are pretty good she'll never see the light of day as a free person again. All because she decided to lash out with hatred and anger instead of cooling down and waiting a day or two. Had she waited a day or two, Rachel would have contacted her saying, "Don't bother to leave the house. It's going to be yours. I just need to clear the paperwork with my lawyer and be sure you're the sole name on the deed." That was Rachel's immediate plan. Unfortunately, that's not how things turned out. Now, I have no concrete proof that Rachel's stepmother levied a death curse against her stepdaughter. I have no concrete proof. The only proof I have is what my own intuition told me from the start, and then what my spirit guides repeatedly told me as all these things started to occur. They were begging me, "You have to convince Rachel. She needs an immediate cleansing, and her entire home needs to be exorcised because there is such a dark presence in and around her home." I told my husband what my guides told me. I told him this is coming from my spirit guides and from my angels. They never, ever mislead me. But Rachel wouldn't hear it. I'm very sad for her, but at the same time, you have to have a great deal of respect for Rachel, because that is a woman who, no matter what, has stuck to her Christian principles. She never has compromised her principles, and for that, I highly, highly respect her. I am Nefer Kefri, your hostess with the ghostess. I tend to upload every Wednesday at 12 noon Central Standard Time. Thank you all, and I'm wishing you a blessed day ahead.